Hi, everybody. Welcome to Course 5 Compass Live. I am David McBride, Senior Vice President of Digital Solutions and Consulting at Course 5 Intelligence. I'm joined today by my colleague, Anis Merchant, Executive Vice President and Global Head of Business at Course 5. Hi, Anis.
Hey, David.
And we are joined today by Scott Brinker. We're excited to have Scott here. Thank you very much for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So we've been doing this this live broadcast thing across LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube for the last couple of months now, and every time we do it, it feels like a bit of a high wire act, like we're walking a tightrope without a net. Hopefully, people aren't tuning in to watch us fall, but there's some excitement to it. There's something that's different about a live environment. And so in every case, I'm always excited by the option or the opportunity to talk live about digital analytics and marketing. But especially today, I'm excited because we've got Scott Brinker here. I mean, you may know Scott as his founding influence in the marketing technology space. I think, Scott, maybe you even coined the term Martech. And you've published prolifically, you've written extensively on your blog, Chief Martech, which our viewers should check out. Chief, CHIEF, MARTEC, chiefmartech.com. You've created the Martech landscape infographic logo extravaganza. It's continuing to grow, and you need more powerful magnification.
Let's hope the statute of limitations on that expires soon.
So it's great to have you here and to talk about all things Martech. You're also the VP of the platform ecosystem at HubSpot. So clearly a busy guy, and we're very grateful to your taking some time out of your schedule to talk with us and share your thoughts today. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Having a chat about Martech, life doesn't get any better than that.
Excellent. So these are definitely interesting times, and the world of Martech continues to turn. But let's start by talking about how the pandemic has influenced the marketing technology ecosystem from your perspective. Are there any trends that you've been surprised about, either pleasantly or maybe less so, in the Martech space since the onset of the pandemic earlier this year?
Yeah, there was a lot of uncertainty, when the pandemic, first hit, because again, just like, the economy as a whole, had so much uncertainty, small businesses, so many things around like the travel industry. I think if you'd asked me at the beginning of that what the impact would be, I would have thought like, wow, this could be just really terrible, but what ended up happening was a bit of a counter trend where for all these businesses, that now had all these restrictions on their ability to interact in person with their customers, their audience, they really very quickly adapted and leaned into digital channels. And so much of that is driven by, Martech, and Martech solutions that, actually on the whole, the Martech industry, I think did fairly well in 2020. It saw a lot more adoption than I think most people would have even expected had, the year been just going along perfectly normal. The big questions were always going to be like, okay, well, yes, this conversion to digital matters, but there still are macroeconomic factors, at play, and I don't think we're out of the woods yet. But yeah, hopefully we will look back at this, and for all of the downsides, of 2020 and the COVID pandemic, one of the things we'll say is, well, this was the inflection point, where the world got really serious about doing digital and doing digital well.
Yeah.
So just to add to that, Scott, what you just mentioned, that companies today had no restrictions and, they adopted the technology. Does that even scare you more that people might have bought things which they don't know would be needed, would be relevant, or also how does it fit in my ecosystem? It's like a wrong tool for the wrong job altogether.
Well, I'm so glad you're asking these questions, right? These are exactly the right questions. Like, any marketer, any business owner, should be asking when they're adopting this stuff. Like, what do I actually need? Not from a tech perspective, but, first and foremost, how am I trying to what am I trying to achieve with the way I'm going to work with my customers, and I think the truth is, there's always this middle ground of, people learning as they go. But I don't know. I kind of feel like actually at least the adoptions I've seen in 2020 seem more in that category of people had a pretty clear idea of what they wanted to do. If they wanted to stand up like an e-commerce storefront, if they wanted to, have some sort of mechanism to better engage with their customers through some sort of newsletter or, content marketing. It just, I look back a few years ago when so much of this stuff was just so brand new. I think it's actually a lot harder for marketers who are still trying to figure out, well, what does good look like? I think because we're not just marketers, we're consumers ourselves. We see so many examples of what good looks like now in our daily lives that I think people had other things being equal, a pretty good sense of okay, this is what I want, and it's being driven by a customer objective, not just the vendor said buy this and magically the heavens will open.
Yeah, the pandemic's a bit of a refiner's fire in that it's forcing businesses to be hyper focused on outcomes and results, and I think what I take from your response is that you're seeing this as well, that businesses are choosing carefully what they implement and what they focus on in order to get the results that they need.
I think also the truth is software has been changing. It used to be 10 years ago, if you want to implement, digital marketing systems at scale, it was an incredibly expensive and laborious process. And I think what you've seen over 10 years of innovation, not just in Martech, but in SaaS in general, and not just the technology, but, the business models like freemium, models have become incredibly popular, product-led growth, these mechanisms that particularly for small and medium-sized businesses, let them adopt some software, start to see it work, get that performance, and then choose to spend more money on it, versus the old way where okay, you're going to have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and it's going to take years to get this all set up. And then trust us, the result will be on the other side. That didn't always go so well.
Right. In those days, fortunately, we've evolved beyond that. So actually, speaking of evolution, we're broadcasting live, as I mentioned earlier, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. A LinkedIn user has asked us a question, and we encourage all of our viewers to share questions. So this one is, we'd love to get your thoughts on this. Is the pandemic actually a boon for digital marketing and the end of traditional marketing? Any thoughts on that?
Yes and no. So yes, it's clearly been a boon for, digital marketing. I in no way think it's the end of traditional marketing. In fact, actually, this is one of the things I've always felt about why I consider marketers in today's environment to be real superheroes is, all these new things that we as marketers have had to learn about how we engage, with customers through digital channels, how we, master, this whole new field of data that we have access to be able to, better, manage, the opportunities we're pursuing, all the experimentation. There's all this stuff that marketers have had to learn. But at the same time, everything that marketers had to know 10 years ago, the 4 Ps haven't gone away, understanding, how we really, size markets, how we understand the personas of who's buying this stuff, how we reach them through channels that aren't just digital. Yes, it might be today that, people are, more homebound than ever. But this pandemic will pass, and even if digital remains, as I think it will, a significant part of just modern life, people are also going to be really happy to be back out in the world, and whether that's, through, retail or, events or, any of these sorts of just places where all of a sudden, like, billboards, I will still see billboards, I will be in a car, I will be driving, and so, yeah, I think we'll see all of those channels, have a role for a long time. What's exciting is to start to think about, this next level of marketing where we're now orchestrating across both digital and physical channels and experiences, in much more sophisticated ways. I think there's going to be a lot of innovation ahead this decade for that.
Yeah. Orchestrating and measuring. And I think the measurement part is where Anissa and I spend a lot of time in the analytics side of not just digital, omni-channel measurement. And so, out of home measurement and the attribution problem and opportunities in that regard, there's a lot more to do there. So I agree with you. This is not necessarily the end of traditional marketing. Maybe it's the beginning of reinvigoration toward even more, I guess, intersection between digital and non-digital marketing.
Yeah, one of the categories of marketing that obviously I track all these Martech companies as a very strange hobby of mine, but yeah, like one of these categories that saw so much growth over the past couple of years were these companies like Sendoso and Alice and Postal.io that were digital technologies that integrated with marketing automation systems, but then allowed, through marketing automation, you to trigger things like, either direct mail pieces or gifts, or all this sort of way of like capturing and engaging with people through physical channels, but orchestrating it through an overall, digital marketing platform. I think, again, that's just the beginning of a lot of opportunity for just really creative ways of engaging with customers in both physical and digital channels.
Are you seeing much in the way of companies, either existing Martech companies or new Martech companies that are really focused on measurement and analytics?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, the attribution problem is one of those like perennial challenges. I think we've made incredible progress with it. One of the things that's interesting is I think you see a lot of the major platforms have all included some sort of like basic, level of attribution capability themselves. In addition to then having these specialist companies, particularly more on the business intelligence side, who are starting to get really sophisticated with the ways they can model this and, layer in so many different data sources to contribute to it. And again, I think I have a pet peeve that I've had for ages with this, that, there's this extreme of like, oh, well, we can just get perfect attribution. And I mean, right, that's scientifically impossible. There's no way you're ever going to get like perfect attribution, in a world where, how do you know that, my best friend called me on the phone and, happened to say something great about the company or something terrible about the company in passing. But it's like, if you get out of the obsession for like perfect attribution and you say, whoa, we've got an attribution model that's like probably about 85% accurate. Hell, even if it's like 60-70% accurate, this ability to like directionally understand where things influence this, where are we, getting value for our investment. I mean, that is so incredibly valuable compared to how most marketing organizations, had run their spend and their budget and their investments, like 10 years ago. So, love the attribution world.
Right.
So
yeah.
Just on the sorry, David, just on the attribution and the whole measurement aspect, you spoke about how marketing today and the last 9 months or 10 months have really seen a big drive and adoption to digital platforms. But in your experience, while talking to Martech companies or even talking to clients or customers, or even through your Martech platform, how much has been data and analytics been the forefront of those conversations, or is it just engagement with the customer? Like, How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So data's become obviously a really big part of like how modern marketing runs. I think as with all things, there's this distribution curve of how much a particular marketer or a particular marketing team understands what's even possible, and so like the upper quartile of that distribution is become incredibly savvy, and how they run these programs. Like you can't run a marketing program, at one of those companies, without having the model, to justify like the hypothesis, the experiment that's going to be run, the expectation of, the return. But yeah, I mean, again, the truth is 10 years ago, outside of those people who were really into digital, or maybe I should say outside also of some of the big CPGs that were always like, fanatical about this, but for most marketers and most businesses, it just wasn't that data driven of a profession. And so the environment has changed tremendously in 10 years, but I mean, realistically, like, hundreds of thousands of marketers across the world don't all wake up, at the same time and be like, oh my goodness, the world's changed. Here's the new stuff. I've learned it. We've implemented it. We're off to the races. I still think we're in a place where if you look at like the early adopters and the early majority are probably there, but the late majority, arguably like at least half of the businesses out there, yeah, they haven't really taken their marketing, organization or programs to the level of what's possible now with data. But, we'll get there.
Okay, interesting. And are there specific things which are holding them back to not get there?
Well, part of it is, everyone's crazy busy. Right. I've never met a marketer. Well, all right, I can't say that. Most marketers, I mean, right. They've got so much going on, and like anything that involves like stepping back and reevaluating how you're doing things and putting new systems in place and learning these new techniques. I mean, it's an investment. And if you are a marketer at a business that's been doing just fine, it can sometimes be really hard to like, justify in your mind, why to make a significant change, which is why, usually we see this change happen because there's some sort of external, force. I mean, classically, it's been because a competitor, starts, changing the economics of, the environment for you. But what we saw here in 2020 was actually, right, the pandemic and the vanishing of all these other channels that had been working just fine. And now we have to learn these new channels, and these new channels, have a lot more data, and it's a different dynamic. That forced a lot of people to start to learn new ways of doing this. And so I'm sure everyone will get there eventually. This is directionally, it's all headed the right way, but this stuff, nobody is born with this knowledge of how to run a good data-driven marketing campaign.
So invite our listeners to continue to ask any questions they might have. Let's shift a little bit and talk just more generally about Martech. Are there any companies that you've come across recently that have just really blown your mind in terms of, wow, didn't think about it that way before, whether it's the way they've integrated data or just taking a completely new approach to their market or helping marketers?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, there's so many. Let's see, what are a couple of the, so one of the companies I've been fascinated with is, if you've heard of them, Descript. That is this really cool tool for it initially was for podcasts and editing them, and they applied all this AI so that a non-audio engineer expert just jumps into Descript, it gets everything formatted right. They had this really cool feature where if you wanted to change something of what someone said, It's like you can actually, so it gives you a transcript. You can change the transcript, you know, and it like changes the audio for it. And they've just come out with a video version. I mean, it's like, this is the sort of stuff that's like science fiction.
Right.
And it's actually here. And, you know, I've seen this now with a bunch of stuff around, you know, personalized video, you know, some of the stuff, if you saw earlier this year with the, you know, the GPT-3 experiments, you know, for that AI, you know, some of these tools that would like write, you know, things for you. There's this tool, boy, I wish I could remember the name of it. Like you go to just like write a few bullet points of what you want to say in an email. It takes those bullet points and it converts it into like this beautifully written like email. And if you don't like that style, you click the button, it rewrites it, you know, in a different, and you're like, this is crazy. This is wild. And this is becoming real.
Tomorrow's future today. The Descript, the technology itself is impressive, and I love it. What I also love about what they've done is the way they're marketing it. The video that they put together is so compelling. There's so many companies out there that are bombarding us with messages, pay attention to me, pay attention to me. Descript somehow just cut through all of that with the promise of the product, but also with just the strength of the marketing. I was super impressed with what they've done.
You know, it's funny. So as I was saying earlier, it's like for that crazy MarTech landscape, you know, we actually go and we visit, you know, the website of every single company on that landscape every year, you know, to understand what they're doing and try and qualify them. And as a result, every year I end up looking at like thousands of websites of MarTech companies. And one of the things that has amazed me year over year is how many of them suck. I mean, like, you know, I understand MarTech stuff, you know, probably as, you know, well as any reasonable marketer would. And I go to these websites and I'm like, I do not understand what the hell you do. I can't find any explanation of this, you know, like it's just opaque. And you're like, really? I mean, you're trying to sell to marketers and you can't market yourselves. But then like, yeah, you come across companies like Descript, you know, I always find like there's a set of them that as I'm going through, you know, this exercise, I'm like, wow, that is amazing. I understand exactly what you do, what a compelling narrative, you know, and so it always, yeah, gives me, well, it teaches me no matter what the technology is, nothing beats like, you know, great narrative and instincts of, you know, how to tell a story, you know, and the second is that people can do that and they can do it and they can stand out against their competitors, that these skills as marketers, you know, still have enormous competitive advantage when they're applied well.
So Scott, on the lighter side, you just mentioned something which I really want to ask that question. So when you started off in 2011, it was 150. This year, it was almost 8,000. How many bag of chips or how many wine glasses you have to finish to go through those 8,000 companies' websites?
I don't think my liver would be able to take it if I was doing it with wine bottles. Yeah, so actually the truth is a few years ago, I started to actually work with a larger team. In fact, for the one we did this past year, it was a team of 9 people who I had hired to help for a few months with the research and the design of the graphic, just because, yeah, it's hundreds and hundreds of hours. Even to just do this very superficial, like we don't do a deep analysis on each one of these companies, but we do enough of a vetting to make sure, hey, this looks like a real company. It looks like they are getting some customers. We can understand, hopefully we can interpret something about their website to know where to categorize them.
Okay.
Nice. So I guess one of the questions will be, when do you start using AI to do that evaluation for you?
You know, so one of the people, Anand Thakur, who, you know, helped me for a couple years with this, actually, that was one of the things he started to experiment with, was he had actually had, like, built this little AI that we were trying to, like, do the logo placement in a automated fashion that, you know, we weren't quite able to get there, but yeah, I bet if we went back and tried it now, given today's technology.
And then the next step might be a MarTech company whose purpose is to understand the MarTech landscape.
You know, it's funny. So I came across one company, what's the name of it? A logo intern, you know, and so this is a whole SaaS product that is just designed to make it easy to create logo landscapes, because they've become a bit of a cottage industry. If you're a VC or what, it's like, oh, here's my logo landscape of this category. And so the fact that there's now SaaS companies like just for logo landscapes, I'm like, all right, this is a bit meta.
So one more question from my side, as we kind of come into the end of our conversation here. If I'm a company that is struggling to figure out what marketing technology to implement next, any guidelines on how companies should manage just how many technologies there are out there? Is there a rule of thumb that says maybe we've gone too far, or do you set up a more of a budgeted perspective and say, okay, you want a new technology, you got to take something else off, or any thoughts on how to prioritize?
Yeah, so two thoughts here. One on how to prioritize, and the other on selection. From a priority perspective, I always think the best way to do this is to start with the customer journey. Just understand what are the different touch points we have with customers, or we want to have with customers. What's the expectation they have there? What are the metrics we're using, to sort of track that? Because in theory, right, it's not about the tech. It's about what are we trying to actually deliver, either from an external experience or from an internal process, or analysis capability. And then once clearly, what it is you want, from an outcome perspective, to then determine well, is my existing technology, can I use that to achieve this, or am I missing some capability, and then go looking for that capability. So that, yeah, you're a problem looking for a solution, not a solution looking for a problem. And then from a selection perspective, and I'm biased on this, but I still think this is the right way to go, is I really think, the Martech world has moved to a world of platform ecosystems, that basically, instead of marketers having to stitch together some random collection, of technology, they should make some decisions about what their core platform is, be it HubSpot or Salesforce or Adobe or, whatever your core platform is. But then all of these companies, they have ecosystems where the apps around them have already been integrated by the vendor to the platform, so that, when you pick these things that are within that ecosystem, you can have a pretty high confidence that it's going to just work. You're not going to have an enterprise architect, come in and figure this out for you. So I would start with the ecosystem and see if you can find what you need there first, and then only diverge from there if, you have no other choice.
Great advice. I love it. So let's wrap it up there. Scott, thank you so much for your willingness to join our conversation here and help us understand what's going on in Martech. Thanks so much for having me. Have a great day. Yeah, you too. On behalf of Anis, myself, David McBride, everyone at Course 5, thank you all so much for tuning in. We'll be back in a couple weeks with our next edition of Course 5 Compass Live. Have a great day, everybody.